Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank TP Mines for inviting World Customs Organisation to participate in this event. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be with you in person. I would love to be with you at the waterfront in lovely Cape Town, but I'm actually in my office in grey Brussels. So I'd like to talk to you today about the relationship between customs valuation and transfer pricing. Now, this work has been very high on the agenda of the World Customs Organisation in recent years. Now, the WCO is the intergovernmental organisation responsible for supporting customs administrations around the world in a whole range of issues, technical issues, capacity building initiatives, many committees that we facilitate and manage here in Brussels. One of those committees is the Technical Committee on Customs Valuation, which we'll be referring to later. But why is this matter an interest for customs? Why is it of interest to yourselves in the business community? Well, the issue, in fact, was originally raised by the business community in the sense that there are strong overlaps, strong connections between the two regimes. So let's backtrack a little and look at why we have the customs valuation methodology, and then we'll look at how it overlaps with the transfer pricing world. Now, for establishing our duty liability, we need two major pieces of information. We need to know what a product is. So when goods are imported, we use the tariff. We have a tariff that is established at the WCO level. So we have international consistency in allocating a coding system to imported goods, which in turn then determines the duty rate on imported goods. Now, that duty rate is then applied to a value for those imported goods, and the means for establishing the value of imported goods is done via a WTO, a World Trade Organization agreement, which sets out the methodology to be used for all WTO member countries. So a simple equation, the value of the goods times the percentage duty rate gives us our duty liability. So looking at the valuation agreement and focusing on the methodology, our prime method of valuation is called the transaction value. There are a series of other methods, but in pretty much 90% of all cases we will be applying the transaction value method. Now, this is established primarily by determining the price paid for the imported goods. Now, the price paid typically is indicated on the commercial invoice. Along with the price paid, we may need to add in certain service elements where they are related to the imported goods, such as a sales commission or duties or royalties and license fees, which may be attributed to the imported goods. And together, the price paid plus certain service elements combine to make the transaction value. Now, we have a special consideration when the parties to the sale are related. So where the buyer and the seller to imported goods are related, we need to examine the question of whether the relationship influenced the price. And at this stage, we can see that there's a closer link between customs valuation and transfer pricing. So we'll now look at the first slide, which I think illustrates this. So we can see here at the top of the slide that we have a common goal. Both tax and customs are looking for an uncontrolled or uninfluenced price. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we can see the customs administration objective, which is to ensure that all appropriate elements are included in the customs value. And the trade objective would be obviously for a lower customs value, where there would be a lower customs duty liability. So looking at the right-hand side of the screen, we can see the direct tax authority objective, which is to ensure that the transfer price does not include inappropriate elements. And then clearly a trade objective would be that a higher transfer price is desirable, which would lead to a reduced taxable profit. So here we can see that although we have the same common goal and endpoint, the two regimes are in a sense pulling in opposite directions. So the driver from the business community has been sort of questions posed to customs administrations in the sense that business is having to satisfy both customs and tax authorities with similar questions. And having developed transfer pricing studies, transfer pricing strategies, business are pointing to such studies and saying to customers, well, look, you will find the answer to your questions relating to related parties in our transfer pricing studies. So the question is that the case, and how can customs make use of such data? The technical committee I mentioned earlier has established a very important principle. In 2010 an instrument was issued called Commentary 23.1, which does establish the principle that customs may take into account transfer pricing studies when examining related party transactions, and on a case-by-case basis can consider such information along with any other relevant information in making a final decision. And that was a small but important step forward. But then the next question which arises is, how can customers make use of such information? And this is a challenge for customs administrations. In a sense, a typical customs officer will not have great experience or knowledge of transfer pricing methodology. So we're very much on a learning curve from the customs perspective. Now, there are a number of differences between the two regimes which make such comparisons difficult. Customs still very much focus on a transaction by transaction approach. We need to reconcile every importation, whereas within the tax world, of course, we know that aggregate accounts are compiled, annual returns are examined, which is obviously at a different level, even though we know that there are transactions underpinning the annual accounts. Also, transfer pricing takes into account not only goods but also services and property, so a wider range of considerations from that point of view. And also the timing is different in terms of when customs and tax are going to be examining the same transactions. So let's turn our attention now to slide 2, which gives an example that we're examining, again within the technical committee, of a possible scenario where customs can usefully make use of transfer pricing data. So on this slide we can see a simple transaction, an exporter who's also a manufacturer, and the parent company is selling goods to an importer, a related party importer, who's also a distributor. And we'll look at it first of all from the tax perspective. And from the tax point of view, the tested party was the importer, the distributor, and it was determined that the operating margin for the distributor was 2.5%. And then on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a range of operating margins for comparable uncontrolled distributors. So these distributors are unrelated and operate in the same business, which in this case were electrical relays. And we have this range of operating margins for those 8 uncontrolled distributors. So we can see here it goes from 0.64% to 2.79%. So we turn our attention back to the operating margin for the tested party of 2.5%, and we can see that that falls within the range that was assessed for those 8 companies. So from a tax point of view, this was determined to be an arm's length price. So customs may then look at such information and determine that equally we can then accept that the price has not been influenced for customs purposes. Now, the WTO agreement sets out certain tests for examining related party transactions. In particular, customs may examine the circumstances surrounding the sale. This allows customs to consider, for example, whether the price is adequate to ensure recovery of all costs plus a representative profit, or whether the price has been settled in a manner consistent with the normal pricing practices of the industry in question. It is important to note that customs must reach a decision by application of the tests in the WTO agreement. It is not the case that customs will accept that a price has not been influenced purely on the basis that a tax authority has determined that a transfer price is arm's length. Now, I have to stress that this is still in a draft form. We're working towards finalising an instrument which will be then published by our technical committee and will be a very useful precedent for businesses to follow. And the idea is this could be one of a number of case studies to illustrate possible scenarios where transfer pricing information can be useful for customers. But at the moment, this is still a draft. Okay, so now let's look at some of the initiatives that we've been developing at WCO. We've had a very strong partnership with International Chamber of Commerce. We feel that it's important for customers to learn more from the business perspective, and we've appreciated the ICC's support and input. In fact, the ICC have published their own policy statement on this topic. We've also got a very good partnership with OECD, and in fact we've run a series of interesting joint workshops where we've been inviting both customs and tax officials to the same workshop to encourage a stronger dialogue between customs and tax at the national level, and to brainstorm the issues and develop sort of working methods to address the issues which arise. Another important initiative I'd like to draw your attention to is a guide we can see here on the table. This is the WCO Guide to Customs Valuation and Transfer Pricing. It aims to put all the relevant information into one useful document. So we have a chapter on the technical aspects of customs valuation and related parties. We have a chapter on the technical aspects of transfer pricing, and then it begins to examine the overlaps between the two methodologies. It includes some country best practices and other supporting texts and references which we think will be very useful in advancing the discussions in this area. This guide is freely available via the WCO website, both to business community, tax administrations and customs administration. So that's my little promotion for today, to encourage you to have a look at that guide. Just finally, at the end of the guide, we have some good practices, recommended practices for customs and tax administrations. As a first point, we certainly encourage tax and customs to work more closely together. I know here in Africa, many customs and tax administrations are combined under a single revenue authority, which gives a platform for a closer cooperation. And in some cases this is starting to happen, but we consider this is an important step forward, each to learn from the other and share information and knowledge in that respect. Okay, so then turn our attention to the final slide, which is some recommended practices for business. And we're encouraging customs and tax advisors to communicate with each other regarding the mutual needs of customs and tax authorities. So really to take into account at an early stage the needs of customs administrations in particular. And this is at the stage when transfer pricing documentation is being prepared. Could also include the development of advanced pricing agreements. You may consider requesting advance valuation rulings from customs where available. This is something that the WCO is recommending. So certain elements of the valuation of imported goods, you can get certainty of how customs would treat such an element. In particular, that could be to determine whether or not we consider there is influence in the price where parties to the sale are related. We recommend that customs are notified in advance where it is anticipated that a post-importation transfer pricing adjustment may occur at a later date. And this is a key issue, in fact, that again we don't have consistency in how customs administrations deal with this issue, but there may well be an impact on the customs value when a retrospective adjustment takes place for transfer pricing purposes. Different countries have different ways of dealing with this at the moment, but we certainly highlight this as a very important issue, and we know business has also flagged this up as a key issue. And then finally, we're encouraging business to work with customs to provide transfer pricing studies and other relevant data when customs are conducting audits on imported goods. Okay, so thank you very much for your time today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that's been useful and interesting. Again, I'm not with you there in Cape Town, so please enjoy the rest of the conference, and goodbye for me. Thank you very much.